fellow coordinator, mi coordinadora, mi compañera, and Sandra Castañeda, General Coordinator of the Latin America and the Caribbean Women's Health Network. Sandra. And followed by the panel with 3 speakers. I'm going to introduce them later, so no, don't worry. They are experts in human rights, gender equality, and media. And then we will take some questions from the audience for our panelists. This is like how it's going to be this session. At the end, we are going to gather some conclusions and we're going to put it together in a political declaration, and we will publish this one in our websites later. So we will let you know to your emails, or you can get into our social networks, all of these organizations. Having said that, I will now hand over to my colleague and fellow coordinator, Alícia Oliver, for her introduction and her words. Alícia is going to speak Spanish, so for who doesn't speak Spanish, maybe you can plug in.
Hola, buenos días. Feliz de estar aquí en esta sala tan llena, y sobre todo cuando se tratan estos temas que parece que solo nos interesan a unas cuantas y pocas, ¿no? Bueno, como decía mi colega y co-coordinadora de la Red Internacional de Periodistas con Visión de Género, Grace, nosotras pertenecemos a esta organización que tiene implantación en más de 30 países, que justo este año cumple 20 y que desde el minuto 1 nos marcamos como objetivo hacer seguimiento del capítulo J de la plataforma de acción de Beijing, el capítulo J que tiene que ver con las mujeres y los medios de difusión. Por eso en el 2018 hicimos en la CSW hicimos 2 eventos en aquel año, y justamente una de las cosas era el año que se revisaba el capítulo J, ¿no? Y justamente ahí se determinó, bueno, ya se venía diciendo, ¿no?, de que de las 12 áreas de acción de la plataforma de Pekín, justamente el capítulo que menos había avanzado era el de comunicación, ¿no? Desde entonces hemos estado haciendo diversos eventos, por eso hoy estamos tan contentas de ver esta sala llena, porque normalmente no suele pasar esto, ¿no? Yo siempre digo que desde luego toca avanzar en cada una de las 12 áreas de acción. Vale. Sí. Y mira que me moderaba, Vuelvo. ¿Sí?
Es que la traductora escucha a través del celular y no del micrófono. Entonces, cuando hablemos, pueden pasar el micrófono, por favor.
Perfecto. Yo siempre digo que toca avanzar en cada uno de las 12 áreas de acción, pero que sobre todo no nos olvidemos del capítulo J de los medios de comunicación, porque, bueno, queramos o no, el imaginario colectivo sobre las mujeres y las cuestiones de género se construyen fundamentalmente a través de los medios de comunicación, y hay que transformarlos y dotarlos también de una perspectiva feminista. Antes decíamos, no hace mucho decíamos con visión de género, ¿no? Ahora toca decir eso, una perspectiva feminista. Para no alargarme en estos temas, porque para eso tenemos a estas brillantes panelistas que van a ahondar más en estos temas, simplemente deciros, y os recomiendo, que en nuestra página web tenemos unas recomendaciones que hicimos para el Beijing más 25, o sea, hace 5 años, en el 2020, y que son recomendaciones que todavía siguen vigentes, ¿no? Como vengo del otro lado del charco, del otro lado del océano, me han pedido las compañeras que hiciera que yo diera 4 pinceladas sobre el espacio geográfico político, ¿no? De contexto, digamos, que diríamos las periodistas, sobre Europa, ¿no? Estamos en una reacción mundial contra los derechos humanos de las mujeres y, por supuesto, Europa tampoco se libra de eso, ¿no? No es ajena. En estos momentos tenemos varios países donde gobierna la extrema derecha bien sola o bien en coalición. Representan la tercera fuerza política en España y en el Parlamento Europeo. ¿Qué tienen en común? Porque son como diferentes familias, ¿no? Todos niegan ser de la extrema derecha, pertenecer a la extrema derecha, se definen como movimientos que defienden la soberanía y la identidad nacional de sus países, ¿no? Frente a la grave amenaza, según ellos, de la inmigración, sobre todo de la musulmana, ¿no? Y también en contra de la Unión Europea, ¿no? Porque le resta presencia como país, ¿no? Comparten también el dominio de las redes sociales, lo que les hace conectar con un público que está poco politizado y sobre todo desinformado, ¿no? Hace 10 años atrás era impensable este avance y además estaba mal visto pactar, cualquier grupo político estaba mal visto pactar con la extrema derecha, ¿no? Pero en este tiempo su discurso se ha normalizado y los partidos de derechas tradicionales están pactando con ellos, ¿no? Además de la inmigración, también tienen en común estar en contra de la igualdad de género y en contra de las medidas que tienen que ver, bueno, para paliar lo que es el cambio climático, ¿no? Tienen lo que no tenemos nosotras, que son recursos, ¿no? Y también a su disposición tienen las tecnologías, las tienen a su servicio. En el Estado español se evidencia, por ejemplo, que el Vox, el partido que, como os digo, es de extrema derecha y que está en el Parlamento español, ¿no? Tiene un amplio crecimiento entre la gente joven, ¿no? No gobierna todavía en el Estado español, pero sí en 5 comunidades, ¿no? Y siempre de la mano del Partido Popular, ¿no? Y lo que ocurre en España también está pasando en otros países. Por ejemplo, la líder francesa Marine Le Pen ya lleva muchos años queriendo acceder al poder, ¿no? en Francia y desgraciadamente en cada elección está acercándose más. La nueva estrategia, justamente, se han dado cuenta, es la de moderar el lenguaje, ese lenguaje tan radical que han tenido hasta ahora y están teniendo éxito, ¿no? Juntamente también con una campaña de desinformación desde algunos medios y, bueno, las fake news que campan también por sus anchas, ¿no? Y ya concluyo, termino ya diciendo que últimamente me ha tocado asistir a diferentes actos en los cuales se acaba siempre diciendo no pasará. Ese eslogan que se acuñó durante la Guerra Civil Española en 1936 a 1939. No quiero ser pesimista, pero deciros que en España pasaron y arrasaron. Acabaron con todas las políticas vanguardistas de la época, además de la Segunda Guerra Mundial, de la Segunda República, fui a la Guerra Mundial, de la Segunda República y, bueno, derechos que teníamos que parecía mentira, ¿no? Como el derecho al divorcio, al aborto, en los años 30 en España, ¿no? Bueno, simplemente eso, recordarlo, tenerlo muy presente porque pasaron, arrasaron y ahí nos llegó la...
Buenas tardes a todos, a todas. I'm sorry, I don't speak in Spanish, my own language. Quiero en primer lugar agradecer a mis compañeras con quienes hemos pensado este evento y lo estamos realizando a la Red Internacional de Periodistas con Perspectiva de Género y a la Fundación de Periodistas y Escritoras de Naciones Unidas. Voy a hablar un poco sobre el impacto que está teniendo los retrocesos en materia de reconocimiento de los derechos humanos en América Latina y en particular del rol que tienen los medios de comunicación o que están teniendo los medios de comunicación. América Latina tiene una historia larga, ha corrido mucha agua debajo del puente, mucho antes de Beijing, mucho antes de los 30 años. Es importante recordar que la primera conferencia mundial sobre la mujer se realizó en Ciudad de México en el año de 1975. Y ahí, después de ese día, en América Latina se viene realizando cada 3 años una conferencia de la mujer. Ya llevamos, vamos para la 16 o 17 conferencia latinoamericana. Y estos espacios además han permitido que el movimiento latinoamericano sea muy activo, sea muy político y muy participativo en toda la construcción de los avances de la agenda política de las mujeres en la región. Hemos pasado desde las dictaduras con las que abordamos, tuvimos que empezar a abordar estas agendas. Casi todo el cono sur del continente latinoamericano estaba en dictadura en los años 70, dictaduras militares, con unos autoritarismos profundos, y luego fuimos transitando hacia la apertura de las agendas, hacia el fortalecimiento de nuestras propias democracias, hasta el día de hoy, donde estamos desafortunadamente viviendo el momento que pensábamos que no íbamos a vivir después de todo este tránsito y, como les decía, después de toda el agua que ha corrido debajo del puente de nuestros procesos políticos. Hoy estamos viendo el regreso de los autoritarismos, la negación de nuestras agendas de derechos humanos, la negación de nuestro propio ser y de nuestras propias identidades que construimos con tanta dificultad. Hoy debemos ver nuestras democracias y nuestros marcos normativos debilitados por cuenta de unas prácticas que en muchos espacios pues nos atrevemos a llamarlas digamos, prácticas neonazis que vienen de un neonazismo, basadas fundamentalmente en los mismos esquemas de la propaganda que vimos y que pensamos que no íbamos a volver a ver como humanidad. Esta propaganda, que hoy muchas de ellas son las redes sociales, que tienen su propio megáfono, que tienen sus propias formas de transmisión ideológica, no son para nada nuevas. Hoy estamos viendo el regreso, por ejemplo, de todas las formas de represión a la sexualidad de las personas, la construcción de esos enemigos imaginarios, que generalmente son enemigos fáciles de combatir porque permiten también la creación de unas narrativas, que hacen alusión a un pasado mejor y un futuro, un inminente futuro mucho más exitoso, y que lo único que empaña la posibilidad de volver a la gloria del pasado o a un futuro exitoso es un presente que está plagado de una diversidad de personas que no queremos ver en la escena pública, que no queremos ver una población LGTBIQ+, no queremos ver esa población migrante porque nos afea, nos daña mucho el entorno. Todas estas narrativas es lo que estamos viviendo en un número muy importante de países de América Latina. Todavía en este momento tenemos un reducto de países progresistas con los que creemos que va a ser posible avanzar en una agenda de reconocimiento de derechos. Desde las organizaciones sociales y del movimiento creemos que lo que sabemos hacer definitivamente es avanzar, mantenernos, resistir, como decimos, insistir, persistir y no desistir en nuestra necesidad de construir las alianzas y de fortalecer las agendas políticas que nos permitan a todos y a todas vivir en dignidad, como dice la vicepresidenta de nuestro país, hasta que la dignidad de todas las personas se vuelva costumbre. Es necesario que fortalezcamos nuestras alianzas y que podamos seguir levantando también la voz para contrarrestar estas influencias negativas en la región. Muchas gracias.
partner too. I will read at the end because we want to start with the panel now, the discussion panel. We have in our panel 3 experts. I'm going to introduce them. Cemre Ulker is the representative of the Journalists and Writers Foundation to the United Nations Department of Global Communications. Ms. Ulker leads JWF, it's easier for me to say Journalists Writers Foundation, global initiatives to promote the culture of peace, human rights and sustainable development, and is a human rights expert on civil and political rights. Ms. Ulker is dedicated to the gender-sensitive implementation of the Sustainable Development Goals, so very important, with a focus on the rule of law, peaceful, just institutions, and global partnerships. She also serves as a faculty member of the UNITAR Global Diplomacy Initiative, lecturing on the intersectionality of press freedom and human rights. Sandra Ulker is the 2024 recipient of the Her Hero Lifetime Achievement Award presented by the New York City Bar Association, and complete her Master in Human Rights at the John Jay College of Criminal Justice. Thank you for being here. Sarah Macharia, thank you, is a feminist political economist with several years of work as a gender specialist in the international media development field. She serves as General Secretary of the Global Alliance of Media and Gender, GAMAG, and lead of the Expert Advisory Group of the Global Media Monitoring Group project, which is running since 1995 in more than 100 countries. Her publications as editor, co-editor, and co-author include Who Makes Tech News?, the Global Media Monitoring Project 2010, 2015, and 2021, Global Study, Gender Equality and Media Regulation 2022, and Breaking Barriers, a whole of society approach to gender equality in media development 2024. Sarah holds a PhD in political science from York University in Toronto, Canada. And Sandra Chaher, I'm going to read that one in Spanish. Sandra Chaher es comunicadora feminista, especializada en género y derecho y en opinión pública y comunicación política de la FLACSO. Directora de la Asociación Civil Comunicación para la Igualdad de Argentina y directora del Diploma de Comunicación, Derechos Humanos, Género y Diversidad, dictado por Comunicación para la Igualdad, con cocertificación de la Comisión Interamericana de Mujeres, de la Organización de Estados Americanos, OEA, y es consultora de organismos internacionales como UNESCO, ONU Mujeres y PNUD. Y es autora, además, de más de 15 libros sobre libertad de expresión, derecho a la comunicación, políticas de comunicación, género y diversidad. Fue fundadora e integra la red PAR, Periodistas de Argentina en Red, para una comunicación no sexista, la Red Internacional de Periodistas con Visión de Género y la Alianza Global de Medios y Género. Thank you so much. So to start, we're going to start with the first question. It's one question and there's going to be 2 rounds. The first question, everybody's going to talk about this issue or this topic. The first is about the challenges. What challenges do women journalists and communicators face in your region or in the world to do their work in freedom, equality, and non-violence based in gender? We're going to start with Cemre.
Well, thanks a lot for having me today. As the Journalists and Writers Foundation, we are thrilled to be partners with such impactful, incredible media organizations to convene this CSW69 panel discussion on a very contemporary agenda. I would like to start with an acknowledgement of the fact that response to the violence against women has never met the scale of the problem. And this is even more challenging in this era of misogynistic backlash. new forms of challenges are emerging because the digital media have found additional virtual battlegrounds with bots multiplying the speed and scale of online violence. Generative artificial intelligence in the media has opened new channels to popularize the discriminatory gender stereotypes. And most importantly, the legal responses to emerging technology-facilitated gender-based violence are failing, because the rate of the technological advancements are incomparatively faster than the ability of the international human rights bodies to respond and react. Let's also note that the misinformation and disinformation trends are among the top 5 problems of the current global risk landscape identified by the World Economic Forum 2025. This is a concern for our all global community, not only for journalists, in fact. Yet, for sure, the women journalists and media professionals are surely being disproportionately impacted by this dysfunction of our information ecosystem. Next, please. According to the UNESCO's global survey, about 73% of women journalists respondents said that they have experienced online violence in connection with their work in the field of journalism. Yes, it's an inevitable fact that the latest technologies, artificial intelligence, they create immense opportunities to translate transcripts, analyze big data sets, assist in visual productions and so forth, but there is another side of this coin. AI systems do also generate deep fakes, false images, and mis and disinformation campaigns aimed at discrediting, intimidating women journalists, deepening the already existing gender-based threats that they encounter online. And these AI-driven attacks not only jeopardize their safety, but also have a chilling effect on the work, stifling their freedom of expression, limiting our own access to information, credible resources as well, increasing the polarization in our already fragile communities. And in accordance with the status quo, the theme of this upcoming year's World Press Freedom Day on March 3rd will be reporting in the brave world the impact of artificial intelligence on press freedom and media, because being an active women journalist, leading human rights advocacy actions these days really require courage at these times of utmost conflicts. In addition to the fact that our work is criminalized under the bogus charges of being a foreign agent or disseminating incorrect information that supposedly boost hatred in communities, while women journalists are simply carrying their own responsibilities and doing their own job, reporting from conflicts or politically oppressed societies. Next, please. And the slides are received from the Coalition for Women Journalists recently launched report. You can take a look at it later. The recently launched this report, they underline some striking facts. The year 2024 has proven to be one of the most dangerous for women journalists worldwide, with over 953 press violations, a staggering statistics of 56% increase from 2023. And this sharp rise in attacks, detentions, and harassments reflect a growing crackdown on independent reporting, with women journalists facing heightened risks both online and on the ground. As a human rights advocate monitoring civil and political rights violations, working on the intersectionality of press freedom and civil society space, I can say that democracy, our freedom online, right to access free, independent information, and transnational repression, these are all intertwined with one another. According to Freedom House, about 78% of the global population, 78%, this is a very high percentage, they live in countries where they're arrested or imprisoned for posting content on political, social, or religious issues. And this also includes citizen journalists practicing their absolute right to criticize the status of their governments. As there is a parallel line of decrease in mainstream media spaces, more and more journalists are resorting to online platforms, where the picture is not much brighter either. So the global freedom declined for the 14th consecutive year. And on a global scale, internet users face arrest or for their non-violent expression, at times leading to draconian prison sentences up to 10 years. And lastly, next slide please. Being labeled as a foreign agent comes with negative connotations and legal ramifications. These are aimed at suppressing women dissidents. Most of the leading violators of women journalists listed here on the screen are also remain to be the top of the transnational repression statistics as perpetrators. So even when women journalists decide to leave their homelands due to extreme political pressure, oppressive states continue to chase after them even in exile. And wrapping up my reflections for this first question, I would like to underline that social media is in fact a very useful platform to mobilize civil society actions, raise awareness on the dire human rights violations, especially in countries where the rule of law is alarmingly diminishing. So in places where the mainstream media is under the state control, where peaceful protests are encountered with extreme police intervention, us human rights defenders resort to social media to call international human rights treaty bodies into action. Therefore, the gender insensitive discourse on media platforms not only concern women journalists, but all of us as civil society members and human rights defenders. Thank you.
Thank you so much for this global view. We have like a global view, but of course there is another specific situations and a view that localized that we're going to talk about. So I'm going to give you the microphone now, Sandra Chaher, para tu introducción. What is the challenges of the journalists in the region, Latin America and the Caribbean region?
Gracias a la Fundación de Escritoras y Periodistas por la invitación y a la Red Internacional de Periodistas con Visión de Género. Tengo un texto en inglés, voy a explicarlo en español, quizás después se puede circular en inglés para quienes estén y espero que esté funcionando la traducción. Hice un diagnóstico dividido un poco en tres partes que tiene que ver con la situación del periodismo, no solamente de no de las mujeres en general, sino quizás específicamente del periodismo feminista, pensando que este es el tipo de periodismo en general que pone en agenda, que pone sobre los medios la agenda de género. Y mi perspectiva va a ser desde América Latina, entonces lo que comento un poco es que la presencia de la agenda de género en los medios de América Latina en los últimos años declinó. Esto es una perspectiva que tenemos, puede variar un poco de país en país, pero hay una situación post-pandemia, podríamos decir, con una reducción y un retroceso de la agenda de género en los medios, tanto en los medios tradicionales como en los medios específicamente feministas. Hay menos temas de género en los medios tradicionales y hay menos espacios feministas, hay una ausencia de financiamiento del periodismo feminista y hay también una reducción de un rol que había empezado a surgir a nivel global, particularmente en Iberoamérica, que es el de editoras de género. Esto también, si bien hubo una ola, un poco retrocedió. Esto lo entendemos también en un contexto de ascenso de las extremas derechas, está íntimamente ligado, no está desconectado, post pandemia, después de eso que fue el Ni Una Menos, el Michú o la Verde a nivel regional, como querramos ubicarlo. En el terreno digital, que es un terreno que en la sección J de Beijing nos había quedado afuera, justamente porque fue aprobada en 1995, que Cemre se explayó. Ahí justamente está creciendo la violencia digital de género, la desinformación de género y el discurso de odio. Quisiera como explicar también, capaz que para algunas resulta obvio, pero más allá del ataque específico que pueda haber contra periodistas y contra mujeres públicas en el ambiente digital, es un ataque a las democracias. O sea, a partir del socavamiento de las voces de las mujeres, lo que se hace es retirarnos del espacio público, con lo cual tenemos una menor participación, no solamente nosotras, sino nuestra agenda. Esto es súper importante relacionarlo, no son solamente las voces de las mujeres, es la agenda de género a través de las voces de las mujeres. Y al retirarnos del espacio, al echarnos del espacio público, esto indefectiblemente afecta el momento de la toma de decisiones y de los debates, donde las voces de las mujeres estamos ausentes. Por ende, esto está afectando la democracia, esas democracias que están cada vez más débiles, por otra parte. Se está hablando claramente de una militarización o digamos una utilización militarizada de la misoginia contra las mujeres. O sea, entendiendo ya la tecnología con un uso claramente sexista y misógino contra las mujeres, sobre todo a partir de las últimas, digamos, de los últimos cambios en las plataformas digitales. Y por último, dentro del diagnóstico quiero referirme a las políticas de comunicación y género, que es un campo que en general quizás desde el feminismo no le hemos prestado tanta atención, y es un campo súper importante porque ahí es justamente donde se deciden, después se toman las decisiones en torno a nuestra participación, tanto en el acceso como en la reducción de estereotipos, que eran los dos objetivos de Beijing. Y este es un campo claramente complicado porque en general los medios de comunicación, tanto plataformas como medios tradicionales, han sido históricamente muy resistentes a cualquier tipo de regulación. En este momento, y el argumento siempre ha sido obviamente el de la libertad de expresión. Y en este momento de ascenso de extremas derechas, esta resistencia o rechazo a las regulaciones está potenciado enormemente. Decir que sí, algunas políticas de comunicación se implementaron en los últimos años en muchos de nuestros países, fueron positivas, pero todo eso está en este momento, en pocos lugares está avanzando, podríamos decir, o está demorado o está en retroceso. Gracias para esta primera parte.
Thank you so much, Sandra. I think the approach is very important because it's localized where the issues are in Latin America and the Caribbean, and it's not different it's not so much different as the rest of the world, but still we have to pay attention to the context, to the localization of every journalist and women in media. Okay, Sandra, Sarah, I'm sorry, so many Sandras around me. So Sarah Macharia, you have worked for a long time in the Global Media Monitoring Project, so you have a lot of experience in this topic. You have studied this topic for a long time. We would like to have your insights.
Thank you very much, and thank you for this space to bring our insights to the CSW. First, I'll preface my answer with an observation that I believe many of us here share. Of the 12 critical areas of concern in the Beijing Platform for Action, I think we will all agree that the women in the media has been one of the most, if not the most, severely neglected. The actors who intervene on the media thematic issue are just a handful relative to those that work in other 11 critical areas. So thank you, shout out to the Global Media Monitoring Project Network. Are you a network member? Who's a network member here? Sirenia? I see the network members around the room from all over the world, and I'm sure there are some online. So shout out to the Global Media Monitoring Project Network, the Global Alliance on Media and Gender, and of course, the International Network of Journalists with a Gender Perspective. So let's talk about the challenges for women journalists and communicators around the globe. Last year, we published a report of findings from an investigation of the news media ecosystem. Before that, a global report on gender in media regulation around the globe, and prior to that, the Global Media Monitoring Project the reports from 1995, 2000, 2010, 2015, 2020, and the next one coming out this year. So I'll draw insights from the empirical data. So in the most recent research, we considered 3 dimensions of the media ecosystem. 1, media markets, 2, media ownership and leadership, and 3, regulation. Beginning with media markets, the ground is not even for women workers. It's true that the sector is plagued with crises, but the crisis hit women harder due to the structural gender biases in the market. That you're still talking about discrimination about women in the sector 30 years after Beijing indicates that the pain point is in the underbelly of the system. So as a result, 1, women are still paid significantly less than their male colleagues, even when controlling for factors such as education, experience, and job role. Those who have studied this area, they find it very hard to get the data from media employers. There's a lack of transparency there as concerns pay, making it difficult to see precisely how large the gap is. But in the global north, American labor statistics, for example, indicate that women media workers earn 82 cents for every dollar their male counterparts make. In the UK, the women earn 21% less than men. The global south, the gap must be far wider. And then 2, as concerns media markets. Number 2, then the unemployment rates for women are higher. They are overrepresented in precarious, part-time, contract, and lower remunerated work. In Africa, we see many women-owned media outlets that have sprouted online, but these are comparable to women's micro-enterprise in the informal economy. You know, the women who sell vegetables by the side of the road, that kind of work, that's the kind of work that women journalists are creating for themselves online. Their startup capital consists of the women's own meager resources and the contributions by family and friends. The revenue, if any, is negligible. Women tend to be at the periphery of the media market in numerous ways. Let's move on to media ownership and leadership. And I have 3 points here. The first one is gender inequality is a pattern cutting across ownership, management, and employment within media companies. To quote Professor Caroline Bailey, who has studied this issue extensively, among the 100 largest media conglomerates in the world, men fill most positions of CEO, top management, and boards of directors in all but a few countries. And those exceptions are the Nordic countries and some Eastern European nations. And then 3, women face discrimination as regards promotion to senior leadership roles. And I'll quote some very interesting data from the Global Media Monitoring Project, in short the GMMP. If the GMMP data on the proportion of stories reported by women is any indicator, women contend with a glass ceiling even in the newsroom. So the GMMP is a panel study that gathers data once every 5 years since 1995. 3 consecutive editions of the research in 2005, 2010, and again in 2015, women reported 37% of the stories. That was constant in all 3 studies. This was a startling finding that had us wondering whether this was a glass ceiling number. The repeat study in 2020, which was during COVID, found that this number had moved up 3 points to 40%. So we wait to see whether this statistic changes and perhaps it's regressed back to 37% or whether it has advanced forward. The years since COVID were a period of crisis upon crisis for the industry, and 2025 promises to be tumultuous with the assault on gender equality. How the changes are impacting women's place in newsroom roles will be revealed in the GMMP. And let's turn to regulation. My co-panelists here have talked about regulation, and our very detailed study on gender in media regulation in 197 countries that I think we published it about 2 years ago, we found that women work in a discordant regulatory environment, one in which, at one point, statutory policies and legislation tend to be supportive of gender equality or non-discrimination. That's at the national level. But going into industry codes and standards, 1 in 3 are silent about gender. Another 1 in 3 mention gender in a very general way, in equal measure with other forms of discrimination, such as race and ethnicity. And only the remnant 1/3 have at least 2 clauses regarding gender. So simultaneously, media house level policies may contain gender provisions on working conditions, for example, but in practice the policies are flouted with impunity and they're excused by the patriarchal organizational culture as natural, normal, and a non-issue. So as regards regulation, the gender equality principle is increasingly diluted the deeper one moves through the regulatory system from the macro to the micro level. And the sticky issue here is the right to media freedom, which demands minimal state intervention in the center. There lacks insight that gender equality and the right to freedom of expression are mutually reinforcing, indivisible, and interdependent, meaning that women workers' pursuit of justice when faced with discrimination, sexism, and prejudice is complicated by a regulatory environment that they cannot depend on to defend their interests. Guarantees are absent in legislation, and Sandra did talk about legislation. Women would have to resort to general laws outside media regulations, such as labor laws and the criminal code, to access justice. And I wanted to pivot a little to the tech-facilitated gender-based violence as concerns women workers. So the challenge of gender inequality is enormous, and it is seemingly insurmountable in the digital sphere, where the owners, the system architects, and the users are predominantly men. And gross violations of the right to freedom of expression of women takes place with impunity. There's a lot of research that shows that women who work online as journalists, the proportion varies from about 30 to 40% in Africa and Asia to 50% and more in Latin America, Europe, and North America. Efforts in different parts of the world to counter online gender-based violence are cut short by the absence of relevant or sufficient national legislation. And where the legal definition of online violence is limited to hate speech, the law cannot be applied to address other expressions of violence, which for women are vast and continually involved in tandem with technology. Sometimes the challenge is not the lack of laws, but gaps in capacity to apply the law or to adapt existing legislation created for the offline world to the digital space. One researcher of the South African media industry concluded that the challenges for women in media are becoming less about numbers and more about the underlying sexism in the media with new threats such as cyber misogyny. Thank you.
Thank you, Sarah. After this, after this global view, that is not so good. I don't know how to say it, but we want to listen to some hope. You know, after all this news and this context, like things like overwhelming for all of us, violence, attacks for independent information, freedom of expression. So we're going to the second round to talk about the lessons and what we can do to achieve the objectives of the Section J of the Regime Platform for Action. The idea is to talk about what we can do. We already do many things. Many people here have done many things. So what we can do, what we learn from that, and what we can do now. We can start. Do you want to start, Cemre? That's all right.
So the recently adopted Global Digital Compact last year as an annex of the Pact for the Future also addresses the urgency of the issue to mitigate violence amplified by technology, including sexual and gender-based violence, hate speech, cyberbullying, and many others. So in line with these recently rising challenges among the politically entrenched societies, I think we must redefine the vision of Beijing Declaration Section J to address and resolve the problems of our modern day. So I have several actions that I would like to underline, starting with the urgent need to raise more awareness about the gender lens of the violations that journalists are facing. First of all, I really don't think that the global audience know well enough about the rising difficulties that we've been discussing here in the room. We are a like-minded community here, but how about the others? How about other male journalists? Do they know enough about the gender-sensitive lens of the discrimination and violence that women media professionals are encountering? I really don't think so. They're not on the same page as us. As the Journalist Emeritus Foundation, we provide humanitarian legal assistance to journalists in exile. And last year, we conducted a global survey among the journalists from dozens of countries across the globe. And in the survey, we wanted to make sure that we addressed this issue and included 2 questions, particularly asking what forms of risks and threats do women journalists combat, and if they're aware of any resources, any institutions working to uphold particularly women journalists' rights and empower them. But most of the correspondents said they are not aware of the gender-related problems of their colleagues that they're trapped in, and many of them underline that women journalists are facing the same sort of challenges that oppressive regimes are putting onto them, which is not really the case. So I think majority of the public audience and our counterparts, we're not on the same page. So we definitely need more awareness to raise globally. And we have to work on collaborative actions to make sure that all journalists are on board for the gender mainstreaming of the Beijing Declaration Section J as well. Because like the rest of the women's rights, this is never the issue that only abides us as women. We have to be all working towards the same goal. 2, I really think that we need more programs to accelerate citizens' media and information literacy, to foster critical and informed thinking skills as a tool to combat the trends of mis and disinformation, particularly targeting women journalists. Younger generations must be aware that most of the degrading videos, sexually exposed images targeting women media professionals may be AI generated. This even includes voice imitations. Again, another best practice that I would love to share from the Journalist Emeritus Foundation is that for the last 5 years, we have been organizing a series of media and journalism webinars, convening young professionals from dozens of countries. Last semester, we have hosted individuals from over 25 countries with expert, renowned journalists to transfer their first-hand experiences and provides training sessions on these hot topics of media and press violations. We make sure that every single cohort there are sessions particularly addressing gender-related barriers that journalists are encountering, and we host representatives of media organizations like the ones here providing assistance to women journalists to disseminate their best practices so there is more awareness on the available resources, providing legal assistance, humanitarian, psychological, mental well-being, and so forth. So these webinars are also open to other young professionals who are interested in media literacy and provide productive use of such platforms for human rights advocacy as well. And lastly, I think we all must create platforms to involve executives of social media platforms to better work on inclusive policies protecting gender equality and women's rights. Because human rights policies of media and technological platforms like Instagram, Twitter, now X, YouTube, Google search even, they have existing human rights policies on paper, mostly, but I don't think they are implemented well enough. They're failing to respond to the needs of women professionals, human rights defenders, journalists, working under imminent risk of execution, arbitrary imprisonment, and many other forms of physical violence. I professionally try my best to use all these platforms cautiously to disseminate the work of the Journalism Rights Foundation and raise awareness on the human rights issues that I personally have grown expertise over the last years. But anyone in my position, I truly think that we will be on the same page. We know how the shadow banning increased over the last years, how visibility rates decreased when you're speaking of femicide, when you're raising more awareness on all forms of violence against women. And especially nowadays, it's even harder to reach audiences, particularly after takeover of, for example, Twitter used to be a legitimate, credible platform. But in my personal opinion, not now, because the reachability, visibility rates are alarmingly decreasing. Even myself, I see very absurd content on my feed, even though I'm not following those accounts. And not only that, dozens of Twitter accounts are being banned to be visible from the countries that were listed a while ago on the screen, including Turkey too, under the state's groundless accusations of terrorism or creating incitement, fear among public. Every week we hear about dozens of accounts being invisible from Turkey, from journalists on the field working on imminently rising human rights affairs. YouTube is no different. YouTube also swiftly bans hundreds of thousands of videos, mostly produced by alleged experts, journalists, upon government's request for removal. Last year they have removed over hundreds of thousands of videos, particularly from India, Russia, Bangladesh, Pakistan, Turkey. So these were, if you can remember, let's reflect back to the list of transnational perpetrators. These are all countries where democracy is on a constant decline, countries where the media independence is getting harder and harder. Just today, another virtual media platform in Turkey is closed, Gazete Duvar. Duvar means street. They were an independent online platform, but just today they announced that they're not able to resist the economic hyperinflation, and because they don't want to lose their independence, they preferred closing their outlets. So these are some of the issues that I wanted to raise for this round of questions.
Okay, thank you so much. This is a view also about like some part of the world, Middle East, that is important to watch too. You know, we're always in the international network of journalists. We are most of us are from Latin America and the Caribbean. We are not all of them. Sometimes it's like we have to balance the view because it's global, and these things happen around the world to all of us. So I'm going to continue with you, Sandra.
Optimista. Para el futuro sí, pero en el presente soy un poco pesimista, quizás porque vengo de la Argentina de Milei, pero me parece que muchas y muchos de ustedes viven acá, en el Estados Unidos de Trump, y están viviendo algo similar. Yo creo que estamos en una encrucijada para el feminismo y para el progresismo en general, para esos valores que nos interesan, dentro de los cuales obviamente se enmarca toda la plataforma de acción de Beijing, que tienen que ver con los derechos humanos en general. Entonces voy a hacer obviamente algunas recomendaciones, algunas sugerencias que veo en este momento crítico, pero me da la sensación de que tenemos que cambiar el paradigma, o sea, que quizás es un momento donde estas recomendaciones no sabemos efectivamente si pueden tener algún efecto, qué gobiernos pueden llevarlas adelante, en qué contextos, porque lo que estamos viendo es una reducción del espacio democrático en muchos países y cada vez más crecientemente. Y también creo que estamos todavía contando con que las democracias existen, y yo creo que los movimientos de extrema derecha están contando con que las democracias se reduzcan cada vez más, o sea, como que estamos yendo en caminos distintos. Entonces hoy tenemos un presente donde todavía estamos moviéndonos en ambientes democráticos, pero esto no es muy claro que sea el futuro que tenemos por delante. En muchos países donde los movimientos de extrema derecha están gobernando, se están restringiendo ya con distintas medidas que no implican una dictadura, como comentaba Sandra, que tuvimos en las Américas, pero sí pequeñas restricciones que van restringiendo el espacio democrático y que afectan primero que nada al periodismo, como lo comentó Cemre, ¿no? El periodismo es uno de los primeros espacios de ataque porque justamente ahí se elevan voces críticas. Entonces, dicho esto como una presentación de contexto, diría que es el momento de construir grandes alianzas. Me parece que los feminismos tenemos rápidamente que establecer alianzas con el resto del campo progresista. Estamos claramente en una disyuntiva democracia o no democracia. Obviamente también en las alianzas con los varones, obviamente que estén en el campo progresista, pero me parece que esto es algo que a veces parece que está muy claro y no lo está tanto. Tenemos que investigar un poco qué pasa con las audiencias. Me parece que quizás a veces hablamos y nos hablamos un poco entre nosotras. Tenemos que salir a ver qué pasa con las audiencias que están pensando, quizás de una manera diferente, qué es lo que está haciendo tanto eco de rechazo al feminismo, porque las extremas derechas se están apoyando en un rencor y un resentimiento contra los feminismos y deberíamos salir a investigar qué está pasando con eso. El campo de las políticas de comunicación creo que es un campo que, si bien en este momento es crítico, no tenemos que abandonar, que tenemos que profundizar. Necesitamos fondos claramente para desarrollar todo esto y los fondos están en un momento de escasez completa, con lo cual ahí también veo un enorme desafío. En relación con las plataformas, coincido completamente con Cemre en la necesidad de establecer diálogos con las plataformas, exigirles mayor transparencia, etc. Veo una escena muy oscura en este sentido con todos los últimos cambios y alineamientos políticos de las plataformas. Y confío más, podríamos decirlo, en la construcción de una mirada crítica de las audiencias, o sea, trabajar en lo que sería la alfabetización mediática y digital para empezar a entender que si estamos teniendo celulares y les estamos dando a los chicos celulares desde los 5 o 6 años, no puede ser que no estemos construyendo una perspectiva crítica sobre el uso de estas tecnologías. Entonces me parece que ahí sí es un campo donde por lo menos en lo inmediato le veo, si bien es difícil porque se necesita una masa crítica, le veo un futuro de más acción, por lo menos a mediano plazo, que en las expectativas de acción por parte de los gobiernos. Gracias.
Muchas gracias, Sandra, por esas recomendaciones. Sí, no es alentador. I'm speaking in Spanish, I'm sorry. It's easier for this part. No es alentador, pero sin embargo hay cosas que se pueden hacer. Hay puntos claves que podemos prestarle atención, el tema de las audiencias, el tema de los espacios en los que podemos alcanzar otros tipos de estrategia, las plataformas digitales, la transparencia. Exigir estos puntos creo que es un llamado bien importante al cambio. I'm going on with Sarah to finish this part of the discussion, and after that we're going with the questions.
I don't know who attended the opening ceremony of CSW and listened to UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres speak. Powerful statement, and one thing that he said that stuck with me is that the patriarchy is back, and back with a vengeance, but there is an antidote, and the antidote is action. So, a couple of years ago, we convened expert roundtables to understand really what are the levels of change for gender equality in and through the media. And what came out of it was a whole of society framework to achieve the Beijing goals. The roundtables, and maybe perhaps some of those you who are here took part in the roundtables. So the roundtables and a review of the literature produced very few new measures. Very few measures that had never seen the light of day. So the ecosystem analysis, however, directed us to visualize the totality of the measures as a jigsaw puzzle, when pieced together, reveals a smarter approach to the challenge. So we pulled out recommendations from their silos, we assembled them, and we identified the intersections between measures and agents. So, policies and regulations will encounter pushback if women are shut out of leadership positions and or if the market model is broken, which it is in many of our countries. Women will have trouble attaining leadership positions in the absence of equal opportunity policies in the workplace and industry. They will have difficulty establishing outlets if capital, which is a function of funders and investors, is out of reach. And market forces will not shift without regulation, which is a function of regulatory bodies in the state and industry, and advocacy, which is a function of civil society. And also going back to what Sandra was saying about forming grand alliances or broad alliances, the whole of society approach cohesively brings together cross-sectoral and transnational coalitions who are committed to designing and implementing a collaborative strategy for structural change.
Thank you so much, Sarah. There is an antidote, and the antidote is action. Yeah, let's act for women journalists, workers, and for women equality. Okay, I'm going to open the mic to the questions. So you can raise your hand, and I will hand it. No, vamos a... Okay. No, vamos a... Lo vamos a hacer. Okay. Puedes venir. Put your home here.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, because it's like so much. We don't have more.
Hi, thank you all. There we go. Hi, thank you all so much for... Hello?
Yeah.
Oh, there we go, okay.
Yeah, that's right.
Hi, thank you all so much for your presentation. It was really insightful. My name is Preeti Kulkarni and I'm a student at the George Washington University, and my question is, we've been discussing misinformation in the context of mainstream media, but misinformation is also equally present on social media, and with the rise of the United States essentially becoming a tech oligarchy and social media platforms cementing filter bubbles and siloing people in their own perspectives, do we still think that social media is the next place that we should look towards for advancing gender equity in media? Should we look towards that? And if so, how can we facilitate social media regulation, or how can we make these platforms more hospitable for civil discourse and a marketplace of ideas?
Did you want someone specifically to answer this question?
I would say Cemre.
Thank you so much. Well, my response is yes. I still think these platforms are quite valuable, particularly for the countries where the right of peaceful protest is drastically lowering. Because when you are faced with an extreme police violence, when you don't do anything, only have slogans in your hands, advocating for women's rights or for the convention of, for example, there is a peace movement in Turkey called as Saturday Mothers, coined by Kurdish mothers looking out for their abducted or killed sons or daughters. And this movement has been meeting every Saturday in a very well-known square in Istanbul, like Times Square, Taksim Square. And every single Saturday, they're being forced to leave their presence. They're abducted, very, very old women still looking for their beloved sons or daughters are being subjected to extreme violence. So if this is the case, then yes, we have to continue the advocacy on social media platforms, but I'm quite aware of the problems that you raised as well. And on that end, I shared a couple of suggestions, but I think media literacy is number one thing that we should all improve ourselves. The pace in social media is very fast. We retweet, we like things that we don't even read out fully. So I highly suggest everyone in the room to check out the videos that we repost, read the content well, because one like is leading to duplicate visibility on these sort of platforms, and these messages are quite hidden in the AI-generated context. So we should be all cautious consumers of what we engage with on social media in terms of human rights advocacy.
Well, yes, very quickly. I think that mainstream media cannot be abandoned. We have to continue working in that space, acting in that space, because social media is a landmine for women and girls. Whether we are there, creating content as individual content creators, whether we are there as journalists, professional journalists, whether we are there simply as users, it will always be a landmine for women and girls. I think, given that most populations get their news, get their information from the mainstream media, a lot of it is disinformation in some countries, that cannot be abandoned, and the work has to continue there. Otherwise, we will continue remaining in the margins, in the periphery of what is important.
Yo creo que tenemos que... Hay que ponerse los autos. Sorry, si querés traducirme. Creo que tenemos que empezar a pensar en un ecosistema informativo, no dividir ya más las redes sociales de los medios tradicionales, porque en todo sentido se retroalimentan, para lo bueno y para lo malo. De hecho, hoy los medios tradicionales su agenda se está generando a partir de las redes sociales, y a su vez las redes sociales están todo el tiempo reproduciendo contenidos de los medios tradicionales. Voy a dar un ejemplo muy cortito. Sí, por ejemplo, en Argentina, o quizás es la imagen que llegó acá, se cree que Milei es un producto de las redes sociales. Milei es un producto de los medios tradicionales, creció políticamente como panelista de medios tradicionales, cuyos recortes se viralizaron en redes sociales. Y Milei ganó en todo el país, en provincias donde nunca había estado. Hay 8 provincias de Argentina que lo votaron mayoritariamente y él nunca estuvo ahí. Pero era conocido por la viralización en redes sociales de sus intervenciones en medios tradicionales. Creo que ya es una división que tenemos que empezar a pensar como un ecosistema.
I think everybody could understand or could access to the translation.
No, it would be great if you could sum it up in English.
Okay, I'm going to try to summarize if I can. The answer is like it will be important to get together all the every media, traditional and platform in an ecosystem, informative ecosystem together. Why? Because it's like the social media replies what is in the traditional media. Sometimes just go from one place to the other, but we have to try to get together in order to have like a more control, I mean not control, but can regularize a little bit better what is happening and can follow up these situations. I think I tried. I think this is overall. There is another question. Ah, sí, me puedes ayudar con la traducción.
¿Puedo decir algo?
Jimena is going to help me out with this simultaneous translation, interpretation, I'm sorry.
Thank you, everyone. Just before I'm helpful, what we're doing here is very important because we are echoes of each other. If I say, how does this work? Okay. If I say something here and everybody repeats it, it will echo at the door. If you think about it, it's indispensable that we're together in time and space. In time, Alícia was telling us of what was happening during the fascist dictatorship in Spain, and how among, for example, women have to leave the workplace, not on maternity leave, but forever, if they were pregnant. So that was goodbye to your working life. Así? Okay. I'm singing now. So she's telling us something that is in the past, but we see it's starting to happen again in the present. So it's a voice of an alert. We have to be, when the voice of Turkish journalists and women is silenced, it was in Ecuador when a visit of the Prime Minister from Turkey visit Ecuador, it was the Ecuadorian women who were protesting, extending the voice of the others, and they were repressed by his bodyguards in a foreign country. It's in Ecuador, during a democratic government, a gag law was created to say that journalists could be put in prison. It was not about if they were telling the truth, but about their intention. So even if the news was true, but the intention of the news was not, if they could be taken to jail. How can you judge the intention of a news? So this is why it's so important that we're telling it to each other what's happening in different places, because it helps us to be more alert of the ripple effects of what's going. And definitely now that we know that, for example, in Facebook, there won't be a group of people supervising the messages. So it's for us not only to report, but also to be alert, and as you say, to encourage people to look at the sources. How do you make it? To look at the sources, to all our youngsters, to everywhere, make courses, media monitoring. In Romania, one of the candidates was a woman, and publicly you have men saying that every time she talks, she's almost orgasmic. Can you believe this? So this is why we have to do this task. Thank you.
Thank you. Can you come here, please? We don't have like a... Okay, 1, 2, 3. Okay. Meanwhile, we'll come to... Meanwhile, we're going to listen to... Oh, no, she's gone.
Careful, careful.
Es que te
Careful.
I see. Good. For the introduction about like what is happening in the world, what is happening and concern us about women's rights, but also media and women's rights. We're going to organize here a little bit our panel so it can be more in the center.
Consider me, I guess, a journalist or a writer. I just found out last year about the term civil society. Never knew that term, and I'm quite informed. But as a person from the USA in civil society, understanding that there may be assistance here in the USA because our African American truth has never been told. Never been told. We have really never been exposed to the United Nations until 2 years ago, the Permanent Forum for People of African Descent. I'm new to this information, but I'm not so sure of my safety because this is absolutely, truly telling our story. Resist turbulent times, ways to save ourselves. I am an independent writer, it's an independent publisher. I had to fund every bit of getting this together myself on income, what do you call it? On limited income, okay? So I just want to say, number one, I would like to be a member of some of these groups, yes, and to know that, you know, the safety is one thing, and the truth that has never been told, never been exposed to our inability to rise in this country versus every other immigrant group that has come and been provided for in many different ways, we have never had the assistance. In fact, it was broken down just like the fires in California. Took out an entire African American built community in Altadena, California. Totally wiped out all the homes at once, where people have no ability to access the insurance in order to rebuild. They are totally wiped out.
Thank you so much. And yeah, I have a question, and I really need an advice, because it resonates a lot what you said about that we are, sometimes it feels like that we are talking among ourselves. And I work for a feminist human rights organization, and I have the same feeling all the time. So how we can, like, in terms of narrative, no? Because I think for me it's easier counter narratives than create new narratives. So I mean, any of you have a piece of advice how we can communicate better, how can we connect better, how we can like put forward narratives that really transform and create and yeah, not only challenge but also, I don't know, get to more people, no? So because sometimes I don't know what else to do. I'm always reacting and I don't have capacity to create.
Te voy a responder porque
Sí, claro, claro.
Bueno, alguien traducirá. Te cedo. Yo creo que tenemos que explorar, porque hay muchas posibilidades de responder. Nosotras estamos muy acostumbradas, las feministas, a responder con argumentación. A mí me parece que sigue siendo importante la argumentación, porque está circulando mucha desinformación, con lo cual es relevante, y me parece que algo que es importante también es ocupar los espacios. Entonces, si tenemos organizaciones que tienen seguidoras y seguidores en redes sociales, me parece que la respuesta a la desinformación inmediata es correcta. Siguiendo, ¿no?, la sugerencia de Laco, siempre primero la verdad, después la desmentida, después la verdad, porque si no ahí se hace un embrollo en general con la desinformación. Y después me parece que hay que explorar narrativas diferentes, desde el humor hasta digamos, motivación, o sea, todo tipo de lenguaje. Yo creo que uno de los problemas que tenemos es que invertimos bastante poco en comunicación desde el progresismo. No las feministas tenemos un hábito de utilización, no más que de utilización, de ocupación de los espacios digitales desde siempre, o sea, el ciberfeminismo, el ciberactivismo, pero me parece que en general los progresismos ocupamos poco los espacios digitales, les dejamos ese terreno. Y obviamente lo ocuparon y lo ganaron porque además hay situaciones políticas de trasfondo, pero creo que es ensayo y error, hay que ir probando cuál es la narrativa que funciona. Yo pondría en juego todas, no abandonaría nunca ningún espacio, tampoco los medios tradicionales, como dijo Sara, ninguno. Ningún espacio de comunicación hoy tiene que ser abandonado.
Well, thank you so much once again as you underline the trap of like-minded networking. It's hard to get rid of this. But I would advise working with young human rights advocates, because they're quite aware and capable of transpassing through the barriers created by algorithms, for example, over the social media platforms. For example, I was quite fascinated, as I believe it's been 2 years already, when the brutal killing of, please help me, the young Iranian, Masih, yes. When that happened and the globally led movements erupted, and we again started to see more banning on social media, I've seen many young Iranian women doing makeup videos on YouTube, but telling the stories on how they're subjected to gender apartheid. But they're all, you know, makeup videos, and in between her remarks, she's advising to use this foundation, that blush or so, and, you know, giving the messages of how gender apartheids are disrupting their lives, and they can easily pass through the biases of algorithms. I think quite smart.
Do you want to say something about
Hello. Unfortunately, it's just we're finishing. Thank you so much for being here. We really appreciate you being here until the end.